The Adventure Jogger, a podcast about trail and ultra running. Meet fascinating runners from the front, middle, and back of the pack, sharing inspiring and funny stories about life and running. Running should be fun, and so should running podcasts. I'm your host, Stephen Kornhaus, and this is The Adventure Jogger. On today's episode of the Adventure Jogger podcast, I've got a gentleman coming from the Pacific Northwest, and this guy is probably everyone in the ultra world knows him, especially for his 200-mile plus distance pursuits, because I don't know of a single person that's done more 200-mile races. It's bonkers in my mind, but I'm very excited to talk and chat with Wes Plate. So welcome, Wes, the Mid-Pack Elite.
Hey, Stephen, thanks a lot for having me on. It's fun to get to talk to you in this capacity. It feels so special.
I know, right? Because like we've talked on Instagram a bunch, and we used to be in a little group that kind of chatted a bunch, and but it's been a while since we've kind of chatted. So it's good to catch up with you.
Yeah, really good to catch up with you. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, like I kind of said, you know, you've done it just what I think we added it up. It's been 11 200-mile races that you've attempted or done. You've finished 10 of them, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's pretty insane to have only one DNF in 11 attempts at 200-mile plus distances like that. I don't know. That's nuts, man.
Yeah. And that DNF was in my most recent attempt too. So I did,
right.
I was 10 for 10. The 11th was the one that sent me over.
Yeah. And I mean, at least 4 of those were 250-mile distances or more. Because, well, then you had Moab as well. So then that's what, 248, 253, depending on the year, basically. So,
yeah, that's right.
Gosh, man.
Yeah, I think I've only done like 4 200s. And then I guess 6 200 plus. So, yeah,
wow.
But once you go over 200, it's all kind of fuzzy.
Yeah, it's kind of like whenever we talk to people about kids, because you know I have 4 kids, they're like, oh, 4 kids, it's got to be crazy. It's like, well, once you get like 3, the 4th is just like, it's just one more. You just kind of got to make sure they're in the car when you leave somewhere. It's not that much different. So
that's right. Yep.
Well, before we get started, we got a snow squall warning just a few minutes ago.
Oh,
and so hopefully I don't lose any power or anything crazy like that while we're recording.
Okay.
Well, Wes, before we get into all your ultra history, I really kind of want to start back at the beginning and hear your story of like how you got into running. Because I mean, you've been running ultras for, I think, at least 10, 11 years. It's been a long time. But when did you start running?
Well, when I was in high school, I was a sprinter, and I also ran cross country. So I guess I started running then, but I think that was such a long lifetime ago and there was also a long separation between that running experience and then adult running. So it wasn't until 2012 that I got into running this time. And I had run through college. When I got into college, I developed unhealthy habits and gained a bunch of weight and eventually kind of got out of the running activity. And I sometimes wished that I could get back into it when I was younger. When I was a younger adult, I would sometimes think, oh, I should get back into shape. And so I would try to get back into running. But at the weight that I was at the time, it was just difficult. And I didn't have the motivation to try to overcome it. So by 2012, I had lost about 70 pounds from my heaviest.
Oh, wow.
I was at a spot where I was like, hey, I think that I am ready to try getting back into running again. So I actually did a thing that my mom had run marathons when I was a little kid. And she used to tell me back during those times when she would start running or start training after, you know, maybe she was out of shape or kind of getting back going again, she would like walk and run alternating between telephone poles. So she would walk to the next telephone pole, run to the next telephone pole. And then over time, run 2 telephone poles, walk 1 telephone pole, then run 3 telephone poles. So I kind of did that sort of a thing in 2012, got myself into shape a little bit, ran a couple 5Ks and didn't really have much of any kind of plan or anything about it. But in the summer of 2014, I was on a road trip and I happened to be in Portland, Oregon, and I was just going to go for a 5-mile run. And I took a wrong turn along the way and I ended up going 7 miles. And
nice.
not a not a huge big deal in life. I mean, I think it might have been the longest I'd ever run to that point. But the thing that was interesting about it was that my good friend Michelle saw me post about it, maybe on Facebook, or I can't remember how she saw it. But she commented to me, she said, "Hey, Wes, if you can run 7 miles, you can run a half marathon. And I want to run this half marathon coming up this winter. Will you run this half marathon with me?" And so having that invitation was needed to get into it. So I decided to train for this half marathon, and I think it was November of 2014.
Wow.
And that changed everything, really. So I guess in a way, that wrong turn in Portland, Oregon changed everything because it led me to do the half marathon. And and I did terrible. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't fuel in any way. I didn't even drink
Wow.
any hydration during the race.
Was this a
And
road half marathon or trail?
road
Road.
half
Okay.
marathon in Berkeley, California.
Wow.
And I got to mile 11 and just totally hit the wall. And the last 2 miles were painful. But there was this elation and the joy that I felt when I finished. It was like I really accomplished something. And I'm not sure I've ever felt anything like that first
Oh, wow.
finish feeling.
Even your like first 200 doesn't,
No, I don't think quite this. It's
wow.
certainly not the same. But that's what got me started was that. And then once I had done that half marathon, then I felt like I was sort of fit enough to do other sorts of things. Like there was a workout group in the town I lived in. They called it a boot camp. And I think
Okay.
maybe there had been a time where there was some sort of like pretend yelling, making people like, try harder, go, go, go.
Right.
Um, but I was always intimidated by it because I just wasn't in shape enough, I felt like, to do that. So after running that half marathon, I thought, oh, maybe I can do that group. And that was the next big thing that changed my life because when I got there, I met Todd and Tony, who were and Eric, and they were all talking about how just like a month before or whatever, they had done this 25K race, this trail race nearby. And I learned that Tony had run a couple 100 milers. And so I got in with this group of people who started to teach me about other things, trail running,
Wow.
ultras, and when you hang out with a bad crowd, you make bad choices, and that's kind of what led
Right.
me to the next chapters.
And that's even before like ultra running really took off because I think it was kind of 2015, 16 was when we first saw maybe one of the first booms of ultra running due to a lot of YouTube video popularity coming out then.
Yeah,
And then we saw kind of another one in COVID 2020 that's really spiked it a lot more. But that's awesome. Yeah, you got to find those friends. You got to love them that are just the
yeah,
bad influences.
exactly, absolutely right. Yeah.
So I mean, you did kind of the half marathon, maybe some marathons for a little bit. You found some trails with these friends. When did you first like dive into the ultra world?
It didn't take me very long.
No, it
So
doesn't sound
the
like
thing
it.
thing that happened was I did that half marathon, and I decided I really wanted to get better at the half marathon, and also I was starting to get into trails because of these new friends. And so I think November of 14 was the first road half, and it was in February of 15 that I did my first trail half. So just 3 months later,
Wow.
and I must have started to be thinking about going further pretty quickly after that, because in October of 2015, so just under a year after that first half marathon, I did my first 50K in October of 2015. So I went
Wow.
from a couple different halves, and I might have done even one more road half in there too. I went straight from the half marathon distance to the 50K distance.
Okay. And so yeah, very short time period. Definitely.
Yeah.
Wow.
It
Now,
didn't
were you
feel like it didn't feel very short at the time. I think at the time it felt like the natural progression and
right?
whatever. But when I look back at it, I'm like, holy crap, less than a year. But yeah,
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. I mean, and the one you did, I think it was what Baker 50K, I think was the name of it. Baker
yeah,
Lake.
Baker Lake 50K. That's right, up here in
Okay.
Washington State, in kind of in uh, it's a little bit further away from civilization in a place called
Yeah.
Concrete, Washington. But it's a
Okay.
pretty good first 50K because it was an out and back along the banks of a lake. So there was a bit of up and down rollers, but no gigantic climbs. But yeah,
Okay.
that was my first one.
How did that first one go? Was it kind of that same experience from the first half marathon where you bonked pretty bad, or was it
It was very
smooth?
similar because like in that first half marathon, I didn't know anything about fueling. And so
Right.
that was my big learning was I should eat like before the night before or 2 nights before, I should eat the morning of. I learned about fueling in my first half. And then what I learned in my first ultra, in my first 50K, was I learned about hydration
Mhm.
because I had, if I remember right, I had a pack with 2 chest bottles, and the race had water set out for you to do some refills. There was only one aid station at the halfway point, mile 15,
Wow.
but there was a water stops or water drops along the
Okay.
way. But when I got to that mile 15 turnaround, uh, my legs started to cramp up like crazy. And so the aid station volunteers were like, "Whoa, so what are you even doing for your electrolytes, your hydration?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And so I had been drinking clear water that whole time,
Oh man.
which not the way to do it. And so yeah, I basically needed to learn about hydration. So they gave me like a little Ziploc baggie of uh, salt tablets, essentially, that I took a bunch of at the aid station and then just kept on swallowing them on the way back towards the finish. Um, and just pushing through the pain. There were some times when this pain would subside, like the salt would do its job or whatever, but
Yeah.
then a little while later the pain would all come back again. And so I really felt like I had to push through something in order to finish that first 50K because I had the cramping so bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah. I mean, that's it sounds a similar story to my first. I was the same way. I didn't know what to fuel, and I ended up fueling with too much salt and like just having bad results from that. But so you did kind of the 50K, 50-mile thing for a few years. It looks like, at least according to your website. So your first 100-mile distance wasn't until September of 2018. Is
That's
that
right.
right? At the
Yeah.
Mountain Lakes. Okay.
Yeah. 3 years later.
And I was to say, and it was a pretty darn. I mean, you finished sub 24 your first 100-mile race. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. I was excited for that. And partly because my friends that I mentioned, like Tony, had already run a couple hundreds. And so I think a few of us had decided that we were going to run Mountain Lakes together if we could get in. I think that year, um, it was getting that race had suddenly become really popular because it had just recently become a Western States qualifier back then.
Oh,
And so I remember we were all going to sign up. The When registration opened up, ultra sign up, like often happens, was almost crashing. Like everything just got
yeah.
slow. By the time I finally got through, I was actually on the wait list. And it broke my heart to think that after all this like mental preparation to say like, yes, I'm going to put my credit card in, to have it say, no, but sort of yes, but maybe
Right.
no. And of course, I didn't know if I'd get off the wait list or not. At the time, I didn't really understand how those things move because they do move. But yeah, and I think it was early in the year too, like maybe even January or something, where that
Oh, wow.
registration opened up. I can't remember, but yeah, I was excited because Mike and Tony and I, the three of us, were going to do this 100 miler. I think it was also going to be Mike's first 100 miler. It was my first 100 miler. I had the year before I had hired a coach, and so I was training really hard. I was in really good shape back then, and yeah, I was excited for that 100 miler. So finishing in sub under 24 hours, that was kind of a goal, and I felt like it was possible. And that race course isn't the hardest 100 miler. It's pretty good 100 or pretty good first 100. When I did it, it was like 12,000 feet of gain.
Yeah. I mean, that's for a first and for go sub 24. That's pretty impressive. I mean, that's
Yeah,
a lot of people strive all their ultra running career to get sub 24, and that's impressive. Yeah.
yeah, I was
Well,
pretty lucky, I guess.
I mean, honestly, it sounds like it went pretty well considering you went sub 24 with that kind of elevation. I mean, did you have any low points or anything that really kind of surprised you? Because before this, the furthest you had gone was 100 kilometers.
That's
And
right.
so you jumped to this. I mean, it had to have been some new experiences for you.
There were I let's see, my girlfriend at the time, who's my wife now, she was there helping to crew me. Um, that race has seen a lot of course changes over the years because of fires and different things. But the
Mhm.
year that I did it, it was sort of a little bit of a loop, like a 25 or 26 mile loop at the beginning that brought you back to where you started, and then there was this long lollipop that went to the north, mostly an out and back with this loop around a lake at the end. And I remember when I got to that loop around the lake, my girlfriend paced me for that loop,
Oh,
and I
cool.
was that was kind of the middle of the night, and I was pretty well. Maybe it was not middle of the night. Maybe it was going into the night, so maybe like 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. or something. And I was pretty tired because this is now going on the farthest that I've ever run, and I can remember seeing on the trees. I, I didn't voice it at the time because I didn't know if it was real or not, or if it was real, I didn't know if I wanted to acknowledge it or not. There were on the trees, as I would go by the trees, there was just like dark markings on the trees. And so I started to just tell myself stories about, oh, there must be like some sort of Native American historical markings on trees in this area. I mean,
Yeah,
we when we're tired, we make up all kinds of stuff for what we're
absolutely.
seeing. And so I was kind of hallucinating, kind of not sure what I was seeing. Yeah, I'm sure it was just shadows and just, the contours of trees.
Right.
But I was halfway afraid of it because it was just a weird thing.
Huh.
That was one of my first interesting takeaways from that long distance. And then I dropped her back off at the aid station where her pacing duties finished, and then I had this long return on the out and back towards the finish line. And I can remember, at night. Now it was like the middle of the night, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Going through the forest, and just the cone of light created by my headlamp was
Oh,
all
right.
I could see. And I had done some nighttime training, but to go that long through the night was sort of special and just a new experience to just be in that tunnel, and that
Yeah.
it's like that doesn't matter where you are at that point because you're not seeing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's something very like special about that moment when you are in that headlamp tunnel at night because like you said, it doesn't matter where you are, doesn't matter what's going on around you. It's like your sole focus is what this tunnel vision created by your headlamp. And
Yeah.
it's incredibly peaceful and it can be dark at times mentally. But I don't know. I love the night running. Something about that tunnel is just I find so much peace in that moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember it being just sort of I almost felt alone or lonely in a way because at the time there was nobody around me,
Yeah.
and so it was just me and this tunnel of light, and I can't see very very far ahead. I can't certainly see to the sides, so it's just follow the trail, just keep going forward. Yeah.
And I noticed on your website too, like you keep track of your finishing times, your elevation gain, position. And this one says video. So when did you start your YouTube channel?
Well, I think that was the first video that I created, and
Okay.
so the sort of the coincidence of life, or I don't know, the serendipity was that I thought that, creating or going to run 100 miles was a pretty special thing. It might only ever happen once in my life. And so it would be a good thing to document
Right.
there. And part of the reason why I wanted to document it was because the job I had at the time. I was actually one of the product designers of Final Cut Pro, the video editing software made by Apple. So
Oh,
I was
right.
working at Apple making Final Cut Pro, and my background was in video editing. I started my career as a video editor,
Oh,
and
wow.
but I at the time in 2018 I was so busy working that I wasn't actually creating any videos. So I was kind of getting away from the thing that really made me joyful, which was creating and making and telling stories.
Right.
And so I thought, well, this will be perfect. I need to make some video. This is a good thing to document. And so I didn't necessarily have the proper gear for it. I just used whatever iPhone I had at the time. And but I figured better to just do something than to do nothing because I don't have the proper gear.
Right.
So I documented it. When I go back and look at it now, the video quality is terrible. There's hardly any video stabilization at all. But the nuggets or little details that I was interested in communicating then, I still communicate today. So occasionally put up a little graphic that says how many miles in am I, how much time have I spent, um, I wasn't doing very much with animations at the time, so that video doesn't, once the sun goes down and there's no more recording, there, I don't get to tell the story of how I got from there to the next place that I show. But it was a great opportunity for me to get back into storytelling and get that joy of creating. And
Yeah.
I put that video on YouTube, and um yeah, and then that from there I decided I wanted to keep doing it. So then I started to make videos of various 5Ks and 50 milers, and just whenever I did a race, I eventually had a GoPro, so I would bring the GoPro with me, and then just sort of started to develop my style and to find my voice that way.
Yeah. Now, is that what was the initial inspiration for your channel? Was kind of this creative outlet from your profession, let's say, to kind of get re-inspired?
Yeah, I think it was a I think the reason why I kept going with it was twofold. One was because I wanted the creative outlet, but two, um, well, I guess when I was going to do Mountain Lakes 100, one of the things that I did was I scoured YouTube and Vimeo for any videos that I could find about the Mountain Lakes 100. And, it was a great thing because I got to see it through the eyes of other people who had attempted it. And in fact, one of the things that was also really cool was there was a video that I really loved about this runner named Dave Stinchfield. And I got to meet him at the race, and I felt like I had met, like, a video star. And anyway, I just say that I just talk about it and call him out because Dave Stinchfield and I are really good friends to this day.
That's
We've run
awesome.
lots of races together, including 200s. But we met at that race, and I was originally introduced to him because of the video that he had made. So I thought if I could make videos of the races that I do, then I can be contributing back into the knowledge base and help other runners who, when they're going to go run Mountain Lakes 100 and they're going to go search for videos, they'll find my video. And then future videos, when I'm various videos that I made, were helping other people do their reconnaissance. And so that sort of feedback loop started to just help me be motivated, but then also introduced me to all kinds of people, because then I would go to races and people told me they watched my video of that race, and that, so that's how they know me. So that in the same way that I got to be a fan of Dave Stinchfield, people started to become a fan of mine because of the videos I was making.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome. I mean, that's a great way to give back to the community because that is such a big part of the sport and community now that didn't even exist if you think, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Like this wealth of knowledge, this database where people can just type in any race they want, and there's probably several videos about it now, and you can find all sorts of footage, and your videos are incredibly detailed with aid station information, the distance to the next aid station. You have those graphics now, and it's very helpful for tons of people out there. So, I mean, that's got to be inspiring to kind of have that almost that full circle moment from when you met David or
Yeah,
Dave, and then now people are meeting you at those races and saying, "Oh, Wes, I love your videos," and it's got to be pretty cool.
it is really cool. I have a lot of voices in my head that tell me negative things, and so I'm quite honest with people to say that it gives me a lot of good feelings to go to races and have people tell me that I've helped them along their journey. I'm very thankful for that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I would 100% echo those thoughts. So after your mountain lakes, the first 100, you did a couple other, hundreds, lots of 50Ks. And then, so that was September of 2018. You didn't really waste a lot of time. You jumped into your first 200 in October of 2019. So basically a year later, and that was the Moab 240. What
Yep.
was that? I guess what made you want to take that jump from the 100-mile distance to the 200 plus distance? Because I mean, at that point, I think you had done two 100-mile races, and so it's not like you had done 15 of them and were like kind of bored. You were like
Yeah.
still pretty new. This is a
Yeah.
big jump. So I mean, what was going through your mind at that time?
What's funny is that second 100 miler that you're seeing, it was a training run for my first 200. So I had
Oh
already,
wow.
I signed up for Moab 240 in January of 2019. So just
Or January of
four,
2018
2000,
or
no,
19.
January
Sorry,
of
19.
19.
Right.
January of 19, just like 4 months or whatever after I finished my first 100 miler, I signed up for that.
That's
So,
awesome.
so many reasons why I did it. Um, part of it was that I was so into this sport and I wanted it so bad to get into this long distance stuff that I was watching everything I could watch. I was reading everything that I could read, listening to podcasts about people's experiences. And I kept hearing about people going through like the pain cave or going through some experience where they were really, really challenged and that they pushed through it. And somehow they came out of the other side different than when they went in. And it always felt to me they were describing a very spiritual experience.
Mm.
And I wanted that so bad. So when I finished Mountain Lakes 100, I was honestly expecting something to happen. And when I crossed the finish line and nothing happened, I was a little bit disappointed. Like, where is this aha moment? Where are the
Mm.
angels and the clouds parting? I really expected to feel something that I didn't get. So part of me thought, oh, okay, well, maybe I just have to go farther. And then, that's one of the bricks in the wall that led
Right.
to the decision. Another thing was, by the time I had met these friends like Tony, and eventually I met Kendall, all these other local runners who had several 100 milers in their belt, I felt like I was late to the party. And so I was like, man, I don't want to like sign up for a 200 miler when I'm finally ready for it. Like if I wait and keep training, you know, wait for those guys to get ready for it. Like I don't know. Part of me thought I'm just going to go for it, whether I'm ready or not. And, I'll be the first one to jump into 200s, even though those guys have this long experience. And I think there was even another influence too, in late 2018, after I had finished Mountain Lakes. I went to see a film at I think it might have been a part of the Trail Running Film Festival. I'm not entirely sure. There was a film that was shown at an art house theater in San Francisco at the time I was living down there working at Apple. And there was this film that part of it was about I think the film was called 3600 Run to Become. Does that sound familiar to you?
No, but I'm gonna have to look that one up.
Yeah, I might have the details of the title slightly off. I think Run to Become is part of it, and I think the number is 3600. But anyway, it talks about a few different ultra things. One of them being this 3600-mile ultra that happens in Queens, New York, if I remember right. It's basically
Yeah,
around like a city block.
that's the transcendence something.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah,
Shri,
yeah. I know
like
what you're talking. Yes,
Shri Moshoy. I am not saying it right.
yes, that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
I
know what you're
watched
talking
that
about.
film, and that film also talked about some other things. And so
Yes.
seeing that too, and like also just reinforcing the spirituality of long distance stuff, just it spoke to me like somehow I need to do this. So when the opportunity came up to sign up for Moab 240, when registration opened in January of that year, I just decided to do it, and figured that I would get ready for it in the same way I got ready for Mountain Lakes 100. I had a coach, we would train, and I just decided just to go for it. I was motivated.
Wow. Now, did your coach have 200-mile experience?
No, she had not run it, and in fact, even to this day, she still hasn't. I think she's going to run her first 200 later this year.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And I think I might have been even one of her first clients to run that distance too.
Yeah, because 200 distance really didn't take off to the extent that like now it seems like everybody wants to do a 200-mile race, where before it was the 100-mile distance was the big thing. And
Yep.
to me, it seems like probably just only within the last 2 to 3 years really seems like the big boom of the 200 plus distance races. And so for you to be in it back in 19 with the Moab 240, I mean, there had to just been a lot of guessing sort of at that point. Cause there weren't a bunch of videos of 200-mile plus races at that point. So again, we're back to that YouTube where you're trying to find information. How did you approach training? I mean, with you and your coach for this, something completely unheard of. You're going 140 miles further than you had ever gone.
I don't remember us necessarily doing that much different training versus a 100 miler. And I think even to this day, when I see people asking online, like, what should I do to train for a 200? You know, a lot of people will say it's very much like running training for a 100.
Mhm.
So we did the same sort of stuff, a little bit of intervals, speed work here, like once a week. I was doing some strength training at the time. I was even doing yoga at the time. So I was doing strength and mobility, a lot of time on feet, you know, back to back long days, Saturday and Sunday. It's it's not too dissimilar to 100 mile. It's just that
Okay.
we did I think it was in July of 2019. I we did specifically plan a run where I would do it overnight. And so I
Okay.
went to the Pacific Crest Trail up here in the Pacific Northwest. I got dropped off at one trailhead, and the plan was to run about 76 miles to another major trailhead where I would get picked up. And
Okay.
part of the mission was at some point along the way, stop, lay down. And I brought a bivy sack with me, and I was going to sleep.
Ah,
And
okay.
so in the 100-mile race, I had done some nighttime training, but I hadn't specifically done an overnight
Mhm.
training. So one thing that we had done was specifically train with this overnight with the sleep too. So, you
Yeah.
know, in a 100-miler, you're typically not sleeping.
Right.
In a 200-miler, you some people think they won't, but eventually you will. And so we set out to sort of just practice what would a trail nap look like, and I think that was great. That was also really good training as well because I was so far in the middle of nowhere. I can remember a feeling as the sun was going down of just being on this one point. I kind of came around this corner and there was this just vast view, and it was so silent out there, and I just really had this sense of being so far away from anybody and any help. um, I think that kind of thing is helpful in training for something
Yeah.
like a 200 miler, to just have the knowledge of or something reinforcing that like no one's coming to save you. You have to get yourself to the place that you're heading to.
Right.
I mean, and it's not like I was completely helpless. I had I brought with me a InReach satellite thing. So if I needed to, I could have pressed a button and a helicopter would have come and got me. Um, but you know, that's very emergency only sort of stuff.
Yeah. That's
Right.
a very costly extraction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it was useful training to have that thing of just, you know,
Absolutely.
I'm out here by myself. I can't stop. I have to keep going.
Yeah. And that's probably something that's so important in that 200 plus distance is that kind of training for with sleep involved. Because
Yeah.
in a 100-mile distance, like you said, you don't train, you don't put sleep as part of your training. It's just not, you don't think about it. But the 200, you have to, and to work that in especially in a 75, 76-mile distance, single push event, that had to have been a whole new experience as well. Because after when you did your first sleep, was it minutes or did you sleep for like an hour, a couple hours? What was that plan?
It was more like a couple of hours. I think it ended up
Okay.
being maybe three. Uh, yeah, it was. I mean, also it wasn't exactly the kind of sleep that I do in a 200. And if I'm going to lay down for a trail nap in a 200, oh, actually, there was one time that I used a bivy sack, but most of the time I'm just lying on the ground or laying
Sure.
uh, without the comfort of this bivy sack thing. But
Yeah.
the mission was to practice the sleep, and so I think for that thing, a few hours of sleep, which is more than I would normally do in a 200, it was still good training.
Yeah. So what was the first 240-mile race like then, Mo? I mean, what was that experience toeing the line of that completely uncharted distance?
Yeah, I remember standing at the finish line, actually feeling a peace. I was very relaxed at that finish line, at that starting line. And it's interesting to say that now because every starting line since then, I have felt less and less relaxed. Uh,
Interesting.
and I think it's because now I know what happens.
Yeah. You know what
So
to expect, right?
I know what to expect. So now when I stand at those starting lines, I'm like, like it's almost a feeling of dread. But that first time I was excited to experience it, but I was relaxed because I knew I had done all the training that I could have done. I had prepared as much as I could possibly prepare. And so I felt like I was ready to take it on. I knew that there was going to be adjustments and that the plan was going to go as planned. But I remember feeling that at the start line. But yeah, then it started. Things we were off. Um, and yeah, I mean, it was generally kind of an okay thing. I didn't see crew at that race. You don't get to see your crew until like 75-ish miles from the start.
Oh, wow.
So I had gone all throughout the day. I think it was not quite, it was like 20 hours, I think, after the start that I finally saw them. So I was moving at a pretty decent pace, actually, in
Yeah.
hindsight, to do it that. Um, but yeah, I can remember also, spending much more time at aid stations. Like I remember coming into one aid station and I'm meeting another runner who wasn't feeling very well and like sitting by the fire with him for a little while. Finally got to the aid station at mile 75 or whatever it was. And I sat down and had a burger and I really like took my time. One of the things I learned in that first 200-mile experience was how much I love aid stations. To sit down for an hour at an aid station is just
Wow, an hour.
wonderful. And I think I did. I think I spent hours total. I was there. I
Yeah.
was not in any hurry at some of those aid stations. If my crew was there, I was so happy to see my crew. Uh, and also that was the only 200 I've ever done where I had pacers with me. So
Oh, wow.
my three running buddies from home, they all traveled to Moab to help me pace. And so we were all hanging out at aid stations together and I was hanging out with them and telling them stories about how things have been going. Um, and actually, so the way that that worked out was those guys didn't show up until about approximately mile 120. That's when they were going to start pacing me for the next 120.
Oh, wow.
And by the time when I woke up from the nap after at that aid station at 120-ish and started to leave with Ed Tony was pacing me at that time, I discovered I couldn't run.
Yeah.
And what had happened was during this big climb up to that aid station, my one of my hamstrings had become quite angry. And so I had this sort of hamstring injury that had happened. And so when I left the aid station, that leg was really hurting and attempting to run was very painful.
Oh,
But I could hike because the hiking muscles were different than whatever that running muscle was.
right.
Hiking, I was fine. And I could even hike at a pretty good pace, but the minute I tried to run, it hurt. So I spent the next couple of days hiking, but the next realization or whatever that came was that over time I actually started to get better. So that
Oh,
like
wow.
two
Interesting.
so in one of the last couple of sections, I was actually finally able to run a little bit again because my body was able to heal over
Oh,
the course of those next
that's
120 miles.
fascinating.
Yeah.
That's fascinating how the body can do that when you're so depleted, lack of sleep, lack of proper recovery, but yet it's finding a way to adapt.
Yeah,
That's
that's right.
that's beautiful.
Yeah,
So,
so
I mean,
I got to have the experience of eating a bunch of food at the aid stations, and then resting a little bit. The aid station medics were also helping me out with my hamstring. I was getting it rolled out, and
mhm.
there was this one medic. His name was Brian Wilford. We're still friends to this day. He works for Destination Trail now, so I get to see him at races. He was moving between aid stations almost in the way that we were moving through aid stations. So I got to see him at a couple different aid stations, and he was caring for me. And also the camaraderie of the runners I was starting to experience because I think a lot of us have experienced it in a race that you meet another runner, you maybe chat for a little bit, maybe run for a little bit together. But
Sure.
it's a totally different thing in a 200 miler where you talk to somebody on day one, and then maybe you see them later on day two. Maybe you see them later on day three. Hey, how's it going? How's it going since the last time I saw you? I mean, it's a totally different experience because you're journeying over so much ground and over so much time
Right.
that when you have the people that you meet and the way that you interact with them is a little bit different and it becomes a bit more special too, I think. So I learned
Yeah.
so many things and had so many amazing experiences in that first 200.
That's interesting. That's probably more. I would say the 200 distance. I've not run one, but from what you're describing, to me sounds more like that shared suffering leads to like a brotherhood more so
Yeah.
than 100 distance. Like in the I was in the military, and that's something that military people talk about a lot. It's like there's a lot of like bonding, significant
Mhm.
bonding happens very quickly
Yeah.
when you're suffering together, and you get to experience that over 4 or 5 days, 6 days, whatever it is, of seeing people, 24 hours later. It's a pretty cool experience to have that. Did you get that spiritual experience that you were hoping for?
Uh, I actually, I feel like I did, but it wasn't immediately. So I finished, and what I do remember about the finish was that I did something that was unusual for me. I like actually, as I crossed the finish line, I like raised my arms in some sort of celebration mode, which I felt like at the time was not necessarily my style, but
Okay.
it just struck me as I did. I'm like, whoa, this isn't me. But I don't know. I celebrated a little bit, um, but I didn't necessarily have that feeling immediately. But upon reflection, over time, shortly after, I started to think about the experience of having gone 240 miles in, I can't remember, 90 some hours. I can't remember what it was, but you probably could, if you have it on my website, it'll
Yeah,
probably
it
tell you
was
that.
98 hours and
Okay.
27 minutes.
So what I came to realize is that amount of, that given proper nutrition, proper taking care of the body, doing all the right sorts of things, and barring any catastrophic injury, which is always a possibility,
Right.
I kind of came to the realization that 240 isn't the limit, that there is kind of no limit,
Hmm.
that we are incredibly powerful as humans, that our bodies are capable of so much more than we have the capacity to understand. And so the 100 miler didn't teach me that because I needed to be challenged even more to know what my capacity was.
Right.
240 helped me see that I'm actually capable of more than that. It's just that at the time there wasn't more than that to be challenged by.
Right.
Uh, so yeah, I that was the thing, is I was like, oh my God, I as a human am so capable. And it was a really special feeling to experience that understanding at a deep level at that time. And that became my spiritual moment, was to just feel how capable I am and how good maybe I am, and
Yeah.
that whatever whatever reasons I have to doubt my goodness, that this helped teach me that there was something really powerful that even I have.
That's so special. Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like you look at elite athletes that do these very long distance FKTs, the Pacific Crest Trail, Appalachian Trail, whatever it is. And they always talk about this moment where it seems to be like 7, 8 days into this event where they've been suffering, their bodies are hurting like so much. But then something around that time period, it shifts and the body just accepts that pain level and almost shuts it off to a point where it's like, okay, this is what we're doing for the next however long it takes. And
Yeah.
it adapts. And you said it perfectly. You're capable of so much more than your mind is the limiting factor. Oftentimes I have found
Yeah.
and believe, but wow. And so you finish this race. What is recovery like for a 240-mile race versus a 100-mile race? I mean, you had a very extensive ultra history leading up to this. Now you've done a lot of events, so your body was used to this for the most part. But I got to imagine that 240 plus recovery is pretty significant.
Yeah, there's a lot more swelling that happens, in the joints and various parts of the legs. I can remember my feet were really swollen for days. Um, I think my recovery from that race, as I remember, and from some of the since, is just a lot of rest because I'm so tired. And also the
Yeah.
amount of training it takes to do a 200 miler is, if you're doing it right, I think it takes a lot of training. So by the time I do the 200, I'm sort of sick of running. So it's like it's a nice time to just take a break and
Right.
stop for a little bit. Let my body recover. Let sleep in the morning. Don't wake up early on a Saturday. Also, tons of eating. I mean, I'm
I can
hungry
imagine.
for weeks, just famished. So for me, the recovery is just a lot of replenishing mind and body with rest for the mind and a lot of food for the body.
Yeah.
And I've learned also over time that I need to do a little bit more movement. I think early on, I laid on the couch for like 3 days. These days, I might lay on the couch for a little bit, but I'm also going to move around because
Sure.
motion
Right.
is lotion, and it just kind of helps get things moving again.
Go for a walk or something. Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, that's right.
Well, then, so after that, you did Cocodona, which I just saw on Instagram. I believe it was that you just received a very special package in the mail,
Yeah,
and which is pretty cool considering this was so your first 200-mile race was the Moab 240, and that was like we said October of 2019. We're now in March of 2025, so not even what is that? Not even 6 years yet, and you just received your 1,000-mile buckle from from the Cocodona race. So you've done that
yeah,
race 4 times. That's to do that many races, that distance in that time period alone is just special. But the same race over and over. I mean, you've done every single year that race has been around, right?
yeah, I have, yeah,
There's got to be a pretty small crowd of people that can say that.
yeah. I think I should know the answer to this. There's 5 or 6 of us that have done
Wow.
every Cocodona, um, and I think all 5 or 6 of us are signed up to do Cocodona again this year. Uh, yeah, Cocodona has. I might cry if I tell you about. Or I feel like I could cry. It's so special to me, and
Yeah, I'd love to hear why. Yeah.
it's what's interesting is I had a rule to never repeat races. There's way too many races in this world to ever repeat
Right.
a race. So when people would ask me like, "Hey, are you going to run Mountain Lakes again?" I'm like, "No, I did that." Are you going to it's at the time maybe at the time, "Hey, are you going to run Moab 240 again?" No, I did that. Um Cocodona was supposed to happen in 2020, but of course it
Right.
couldn't happen in 2020. So it happened in 2021, and I was so excited to do it for a couple of reasons. One, I thought that I liked 200s, and so I wanted to try another one. But when I was getting into 200s and I was watching all those YouTube videos, one of the people that I was watching was Kerry Ward. Full
Okay.
Tilt Ward is the name of his YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And so one of the things was he was making films about inaugural races. And I remember thinking, like, how on earth do you get to find out about an inaugural race? Like, how does Candace Burt know you exist? And she's going to create this whole new 200 miler that no one's ever done. And yet she's going to invite you to do it. Like, how does that happen? And so I was really curious about it. So when I learned that there was going to be this new 200 miler, the Cocodona 250, I kind of thought, oh, I want to get in on that. I want to be one of those people who does an inaugural event. So I was so excited to get to do it. So when the first year happened in 2021, I was there, did it, and amazingly, I got to meet Kerry Ward. We actually spent about half the race together.
Oh wow.
It was one of those very special things that happens at a long distance or multi-day event. But it was great because it was an inaugural event. I got to be there experiencing Aravipa's first attempt at a 200. And I think it's common knowledge they had lots of problems. The aid station food was a disaster. We would
Yeah.
show up at the aid station. We'd be like, "What do you got for food?" Because a lot of us had, I had done Moab 240, and the food at the aid stations was always amazing. Burgers and maybe pizza. It was like
Right.
quesadillas and real
You
food.
always hear about avocado toast too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the joke at Cocodona that year was we would get to an aid station and we'd be like, "So what do you got?" And they're like, "Well, we've got peanut butter and jelly squares, and we've got bean roll-ups." We're like, what's happening?
Oh my
So
goodness.
at one point, my crew went and got me McDonald's just so I could have like something more substantial. When we were in Sedona, they went and got me like a burrito from town. But anyway, it was an experience, and I don't begrudge. There's no bad feelings at all. They,
Yeah,
they
of
didn't
course.
know. So after having done the inaugural year, then I'm like, well, you know what? I'm going to break the rule. I want to go back and do it the second year because I want to see how they improve things from year one to year two.
Right.
And then there was a fire on the course, which led them to do a last minute reroute. So then after year two, I decided I want to go back and do year three because I want to try the original course again. So then, of course, then I think my wife said the next year, hey, you should do year four. And also, it was like, hey, if I do year four, then that's going to be 1,000 miles of Cocodona. So it just ended up becoming this thing where one year led to doing it another year. And of course, even by the second year, my video from the first year had been seen by a lot of the runners. And so I had all that good feelings of a lot of people knowing who I was and thanking me for my help in their training. So over time, it's just I've become a part of that community pretty deeply.
Certainly.
And
Yeah.
so for me, it's not, I'm totally happy that I broke the repeating rule because it has been so special to be a part of that event every single year. And that race has grown to now it has 4 different distances. And so lots of different people are being a part of it. Even last year when I ran it, there was a whole bunch of the 125-mile runners who, as they passed me, they were saying hi to me because they recognized me. So it's a real special event. And I could just go on and on about it. The way that it goes from, the Sonoran Desert near Phoenix up and over through the pine forests and then eventually through Sedona, which of course is amazing. And then eventually up onto that plateau where Flagstaff is. You see so much. And so it's a real journey across all kinds of different climates and stuff. So anyway, it's just a real special thing.
What's the altitude difference in that race? I think it starts, isn't it somewhere around like 4,000 feet of elevation gain, give or take or is it more or less?
It starts out like 2,000-ish feet.
Okay, 2,000.
But then it goes up to, I think the highest,
11, right?
We go up to 9 towards
9.
the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's a big difference.
And then you up and down, of course, a lot along the way. Right. I think it's like 37,000 feet of gain or something like that total across the whole thing.
Wow. So I got to ask then, did they learn their lessons and was year 2 like much improved as far as aid station supplies, food, all that stuff?
Yeah. Aid station food in year 2 was way better. And I think it's maybe either continued to get better or it's always been the same level of good. It's been great ever since.
Yeah. Well, it seems like ever since they started the live stream, that race has just taken off to where now I would say, I mean, you would know, you've done it, but I would say that's kind of the premier 200 plus mile distance event in the country. I certainly Candace Burt's races are very well known for beautiful courses and great aid stations, but I just hear so many people talking about Cocodona and wanting to go do Cocodona that I don't hear them talking about other races. And
the live stream, I think, is a big part of that. I think you're right to call that out. I mean,
absolutely.
Destination trail races are epic, and a race like Bigfoot up here in the Pacific Northwest is unbelievable. If you're interested in doing 200 milers, the destination trail races, you have to do them. They're a part of the thing. But in terms of like participation from the audience or as a spectator sport, the Cocodona is really breaking ground with that live stream because there's so many people who throughout that week are participating in that live stream, watching it from their home or from their office. And it's really special. They get to see me, for example, and other runners almost as much as my crew does, just in terms of the live stream. And, there's comments in the live stream about people, seeing the runners that they like. And I think it really makes it something that so many people want to be a part of because they can witness it from that live stream.
Yeah. And I think it was in 2022, I was watching some of the live stream and I don't remember the name of the aid station, but you came in on camera while I was watching and the chat was just like, oh, there's Wes, there's Wes, there's Wes, there's Wes. It was pretty cool to see that. And it's neat that you think like, I can't remember now. I think it was last year's live stream I was watching where at one point there was like over 5,000 people watching a 200 plus mile race. It was early in the race. Yeah. But still, that's just nuts to think of that many people tuning into a 200 mile race. Yeah. Like it's not the Boston Marathon. It's not something like that. It's what Airvipa has done with their live streaming is really catapulting this sport forward at a very quick pace. And it's kind of cool to see. And I think it's going to do a lot of great things for the sport in the long run and bring a lot of different things into the sport, which will be positives.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, you got that 1,000 mile buckle. You've done this race now. You're going back for the fifth time. Obviously, it sounds like an incredibly special race to you. One thing I definitely wanted to talk about, which I was excited about in hearing, was the Arizona Monster, the first 300-mile race put on by Destination Trail Race as well. And you've got that on your schedule coming up not too much longer. When is it?
It's like 2 weeks from now or something.
Yeah, April 4th. April 4th. So 300 miles on the Arizona Trail mostly, right?
Yeah, a lot of it's on the Arizona Trail.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I'm assuming you've probably run a good bit of these trails already just in other races and training, probably.
No, this is in a
Really?
completely different part of Arizona than I have done much running. Although
Wow.
last year, a little over a year ago, I was in Arizona. Actually, I went on an adventure run with Steve Adderholt, who's the race director of Cocodona. He and I got together for a thing.
Is your video, is that the video where it was like snowing in
Yes.
part of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, it was going to be this really cool day running up in the mountains of the desert,
Right.
and it ended up being this snowstorm. It was still an epic day. The next day, I went for a little run on the AZT to the east of where we had done that, and I it the the race Arizona Monsters starts very close to where that
Okay.
run was. So I've been in the area, but it heads south from there, goes through Tucson, and I have not been on any part of that Arizona
Okay.
trail or that part of Arizona. So for me, it's going to be an entirely new experience seeing a lot of different trails than I've experienced before.
So is this trail going to be much more exposed then versus Cocodona?
Yeah, that's the expectation. I've been
Okay.
looking at some of the photos that people have posted on the Facebook group of recon runs that different people have been doing, and the sort of the common feedback is it's exposed like the entire time.
Wow.
We're not having that experience of going up into pine forests, and there's not that variety of ecology. I don't think it's going to be much more desert the whole way, and
Interesting.
yeah, so I think we're going to be we're going to be covered up, however we do it. I like to have a sun hat with
Right.
with a cape and long sleeve shirts, long sleeve sun shirts on, keeping the sun off of me. But yeah, I think it's going to be exposed the whole.
Do you know what the projected elevation gain is supposed to be for that?
Oh,
I
not
feel
off
like
the
it
top of
was
my
quite a
head.
lot. I mean,
Yeah,
obviously 300 miles,
like
it's got to be.
I think I think it might be around 40,000.
Okay.
I don't know.
What?
It's not. I don't think it's as much as like Tour de Jean or something like that in Europe.
Okay.
I think, but it's kind of funny. I don't look too closely at those numbers sometimes because what the website says and then later what my watch says are often so different that
Right.
I just sort of like take it all with a grain of salt. I kind of look at the elevation profile and maybe individual sections I care about more than the overall thing. Like if there's one section that's got 6,000 feet in that one section, like, okay, I know that's the tough section.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah.
So up until this race, I think what is the longest you've done 256 at that first Cocodona?
Yeah.
Okay. So 44 more miles. Is this a true 300 or is it like a 310? Do you know what?
I think they're claiming it's 309.
309. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a good bit more distance for you. But like you said, once you get past that 200, it's all just kind of doesn't really matter. So
Yeah, the way I've been thinking about it is it's like Cocodona plus a day.
Yeah.
So and I've done Cocodona now between, I think the fastest I've done Cocodona was in just under 96 hours. That
Okay.
year, my goal was to do it in less than 4 days. And so I did it in just under 96 hours. And I think the longest it's taken me was 107 hours.
Okay.
So I just think about this like, okay, well, let's say I'm at 107 hours, but now I've got to go another 50-ish miles. That's about a day. So basically, I'm just looking at one more day. And, of course, when you set out to run 250 miles, you're not going to go one more day because you're only going to go the distance you set out to run. But
Right.
I figure if I set out to run 300-ish, taking it with the same sort of approach that I take Cocodona, my hope is that I'll be able to get to that last day and be like, okay, well, now it's just one more day.
Just
Let's
one
just
more
keep on
day.
going. Yeah.
What is the cutoff for the Arizona Monster?
Oh, these are things
It's
I
got
should
to
know.
be.
It's well, I think it starts on Friday the 4th, and the
Yep, the
cutoff
fourth.
is Friday the 11th at
Okay, so
I think at 4 p.m. So it's like whatever, it's like 1 week plus 2 hours, I
okay,
think is what the cutoff time is.
okay, interesting. Now it seems like that race, even though it's so new, but because the kind of the explosion of that really 200 plus distance, I mean that race seems to have sold out pretty quickly,
It did.
and it's at capacity. I mean, which is crazy for a brand new race, but I mean it is a Candace race, so you know it's going to be
Yeah.
run well. It's going to be set up and organized. And what over your 11 attempts at 200 plus distance that you have done, the 10 for 10 you did, what have you learned as far as sleep strategy that you're going to take into this race?
Early and often, I think is what I have,
Okay.
which is where I have settled into that. Because when I did my first couple 200s, especially the second time when I did it, my first Cocodona, I was trying to go as long as I could without sleep.
Okay.
Um, and by the time I slept in that first Cocodona, I was a mess that night, or that third night. So, or that night of day three. I These days I try to be proactive and get ahead of the game, and I try to sleep every night. And so, my plan will be, I guess, well, we'll see how this plan goes because this race start is much later than a normal race start. I'm going to be starting at 1 p.m. on
Oh,
Friday.
that's interesting.
There's,
Okay.
I think there's four different start times. They've got 300 some runners. And I think in order to manage the number of people on course at any one time, there's like four waves of start. And so, so I'll be starting a little bit later. So nighttime is going to come sooner, fewer number of miles at night.
Right.
So we'll see how well I do sleeping the first night. I might not sleep the first night or something. We'll just have to see. But in general, my strategy is to try to sleep either the first night or early in the second morning, hopefully before the sun comes up.
Okay.
Take advantage of my body wanting to sleep when it's dark. And then I don't need a lot of sleep. An hour to an hour and a half really is all I do
Okay.
if for a long sleep. I might sleep just 30 minutes sometimes too. But I've it's I have found in my multiple times that I do a lot better if I get that sleep sort of banked early. And I think
Interesting.
and I think other people have reported similar things.
Yeah. So what would you say is your average for Cocodona since you've done that 4 times now? How many hours do you think you sleep per race?
It's about 6 hours total.
That's it.
So,
Okay.
yeah, I think it varies, and plus it can be hard to know how much sleep I actually get because
Sure.
usually if I have any sense of how much time, it's usually how long was I lying down, and so obviously you're not sleeping for that entire
Yeah.
time you're lying down, but yeah, it's usually 6-ish hours because it's about an hour to an hour and a half a day, and it's
Okay.
usually about 4 days.
Well, with the 11 that you've done already, what are you hoping to experience at the Arizona Monster that maybe you haven't experienced already?
Um, oh yeah. I'm excited to just, I guess, to go a little bit further and just see if there is much of a difference between 4-ish to 5 days versus 5-ish to 6 days. I'm just curious to see how I do. Now, I have to keep in mind with the monster that I have to get to the finish a little bit not broken because 3 weeks later I have to return to Arizona to start Cocodona again.
Oh
So,
gosh.
um, sometimes I might do a race and be like, whatever it takes to get to the finish. I don't care if get hurt or whatever. Or I might, if I'm going to be sore or tired, I don't care. I don't want to completely deplete myself
Right.
during Arizona Monster. So I am thinking to myself, maybe it's hard sometimes to run slow. I should say in 200s, we're all running slow. I mean, the
Right.
whole
Yeah, sure.
criticism that we're walking the whole thing, it's totally legit. We're walking a lot of it, but it's not legit to criticize it because even if you're going to walk 200 miles in one go, I mean,
Yeah.
that's hard.
That's still a lot. Yeah.
And there is a bit of running because it's, even walking gets boring. It's good to move and try different muscles. And so
Sure.
I'm constantly changing my pace just to keep my body interested in it. But I am thinking that I might try to be a bit more like thoughtful. Like I might normally try to go a little bit faster here, but maybe I will slow down purposely. We'll see if I can actually pull that off. But my hope is to get to the finish line, not terribly beat up, just because I have to do a quick recovery to try it again a little bit later.
Yeah, well, I guess you can kind of draw back on your experience from 2022 when you did the Grand Slam of 200s because you had what in May, you had Cocodona, June, Tahoe 200,
Yeah.
August, Bigfoot 200, then the Moab 240 in October. So that May to June turnaround from Cocodona to Tahoe was probably, I don't know, is that similar to what you're going to be doing this time? Because I mean,
Is a little that was a little bit longer. I think it might have been 5 weeks,
okay,
but still it is similar, and it does give me um sort of evidence and hope that I can pull this off. And
right,
also, there's been years where like Tahoe has been moved because of some problem, and so I have friends who have had to do a turnaround of like 2 or 3 weeks between events too. So other people have done it. I've done something similar. Um, so I guess I'm kind of seeing Monster and Cocodona as one big project
right,
because to me the thing that's scary is doing both of them. I've done Cocodona enough that I know the course really well. I have a lot of experience with the course, and I rely on that experience when I'm there to help me get through it. And so when when it happened that I had signed up for both these things, part of the thing that I told myself was, well, I haven't been truly scared in a little while about one of these projects. So
right.
this one does scare me. And so that for me was a good motivator to go ahead and give it a try. Let's see what I'm capable of. Let's see if I can do 550 plus miles in the span of just over, 5 or 6 weeks.
5 weeks. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
But I like that you said that challenges you and that scares you because that's where I think I talked to you actually. It would have been back in 2023 because I was signed up for my first 200, and that's where I was looking for that challenge again, something to scare me because I'd only done 5 100-mile races, but I knew I could finish them, and I wanted a challenge again, and that's where I talked to you, and I was really kind of trying to get some nuggets out of you, and you were very helpful, of course, which was great. Unfortunately, I didn't get to run the race, but that's going to be really cool to see you have this new challenge, 550 miles in 5+ weeks. It's so funny though, because you think like a lot of people will say, oh, don't go run 50Ks on back-to-back weekend, or don't go do a 100-mile race every month, or within a 2 month period. But then it's like how our bodies adapt to kind of what we put them through and they get used to it. And you're the 200 king. You do 2 3 a year, sometimes maybe 4 a year, like you've done, and your body just adapts to it. So I
Yeah.
think you've probably got a pretty good shot of, well, not a pretty good shot, I have every confidence you're going to be successful at both of these and not destroy yourself. It'll be fun to watch the live stream, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm nervous. I'll be honest with you, because it is a big, big thing. And,
Yeah.
when I trained for that first 200 miler, I mean, I was working full time, but I was also, I remember training so hard. And I feel like these days my life is weirdly even busier than it was then. And I feel like I have less time to devote to the mental prep for these things. So, I'm scared because it's like, have I done enough to get ready for this? I look at Instagram at all my fellow friends who are training for this, and they're doing stuff that looks way harder than what I'm doing. So we'll see how it goes. And but the experience goes a long way when you've done something similar, or you know you're capable of doing a distance. It takes away so much of I guess a little bit of the fear. I know that
Yeah.
I could do either one of these things, not easily, but I know that I can do it. I've done it before. Now there can be any kind of extraordinary circumstance that pulls me out of the race for injury or something, um, but yeah, to do this big number of miles, because it's that recovery in between that's going to be pretty key
Right.
to get ready for it to the
Be very
next one. So
intentional with that.
yeah,
Absolutely. Well, let's briefly talk about the Cocodona 250 coming up because I think this has the potential to be one of the biggest races of the year as far as a competitive standpoint, and what could be one of the most fun races to watch as a spectator.
yeah.
I mean, we've got Harold Zabertis is coming back.
Okay,
You've
he's coming.
got Ryan Sands is coming, which I don't even know if Ryan done 200 plus distances before.
I
I
don't know
mean,
that name, so maybe not.
well, he was a former professional trail and ultra runner.
Okay.
He was great at the 100-mile distance, 100 Ks. Then you've also got, of course, Michael Versteeg. You got DJ Fox. So I'm really curious to see after he set some FKTs this past summer that were really impressive. Corey Waltering is going to be there, which will be cool to see with his
Yes.
experience
He
at.
was there the inaugural year.
Yeah, that'll be neat to see him. Michael McKnight. And I thought I saw also that Courtney DeWalter is going to be there as well.
Oh, that's cool.
So I mean, and I'm sure there's tons of other names that I'm not. Oh, and of course I cannot forget Andy Jones Wilkins. He's going to be there, which is going to be really cool to see that. But so many of these people, it's going to be so exciting. I mean, with your experience, I don't know if you follow any of those, but what do you think is going to shake out in this? I didn't see Jeff Browning's name, but I didn't really skim through it too much to know if he's coming back after kind of what happened last year. But
Yeah.
um, I don't know. What do you think might play out in this race? Who do you think might come home with the victory on this?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't pay attention very much to the elites, so I
Right.
don't know. Um, the only time that I really, a couple of years ago, not last year, the year before, so it must have been 23, when Michael McKnight had his breakdown the first night, and it ended up at like 60 something place, leaving mile 60.
Okay.
And then he had to come back to, did he win the race or second
I
place?
think he.
I can't remember. But
I can't remember either now. Yeah.
it's about the only time that I really paid attention was when I was at mile 80-ish and Michael McKnight passes me. And I'm like, what are you doing way back here? But then I would get to aid stations and I would get these reports about Michael McKnight is now moved up to this place and now he's in third place. And I mean, I'm just like, what? And that was pretty exciting to see that kind of a comeback.
Yeah.
But for the most part, a lot of the times, these races are often point to points. And so unless you're at the front, you're never going to see the people at the front. So, the only people that you see are the people who are in your pace group, the people that you're kind of running the same speed of. So yeah, generally I'm not too aware of what's going on up at the front.
Yeah. Well, it'll be
But
interesting to
Versteeg
watch, and
he's got a lot of experience for sure with this race
he has a lot
running
with
in
this
Arizona
race.
in general. So
And he's won this race before, I believe. Michael
I
Versteeg. I
think it
think he
was the first year I think he
21. I
won.
believe he won.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's going to be fun to watch, regardless, just with that
Sure.
live stream, seeing you come in as well. I remember one of the comments I saw one year. Somebody said that they were like, "Is that?" Somebody says, "Is that Wes?" And somebody else commented, "Yeah, that's definitely him with the cape. Like you have that look that you're always. It's always Wes. You can see the know that that's you.
Yeah,
It's like your persona you got to put on for the race, you know."
it's true.
Well, let's end with a question on, you know, somebody that's run maybe a couple of 100-mile races and they're looking to make that step to the 200-mile distance. Like, what's a piece of advice that you would give them to kind of help them be successful in their first attempt?
Oh, well, I would first off say that success in your first attempt can be defined in lots of different ways. And
Definitely.
it doesn't necessarily include finishing.
Right.
And so I would encourage, I guess, just anybody in general with ultras is to give yourself the permission to have the experience that you're gonna have, which may not include finishing, and that's okay. These
Yeah.
things are really, really hard. And I think it's amazing that it took me my 11th 200 to finally drop out of one and not finish it. Um, and that was also largely just a decision. I wasn't having fun in that event and I didn't want to go on. And
Oh, really?
so I guess I've said before publicly, we need to normalize DNFs. And so I'm going to I'll pull that out here too. So, so that's one thing to keep in the back of your mind if you're starting out in your first 200 is that you're taking on something that is so audacious that a lot of people don't finish it on their first time, and a lot of people don't finish it on their second or third
Right.
times either. I mean, um, the during training and as you're thinking about 200s, one thing I think to keep in your mind is just time on feet. That's super, super important. Um, Even if you're just hiking, going for a super long walk, some people do a lot of treadmill time. I think Candace has even talked about having a treadmill desk. So I think there are some people who, while they're working, will just kind of be constantly walking. The the thing about 200s is it is really a contest of eating, um, which is different than other ultras. And some of the, especially faster ultras, it can be tough to get real food in because your
Right.
body can't really process that while it's also at the same time trying to pump the blood out to the muscles that are working so hard. In 200s, it's so much slower a pace that you can eat a burger and head back out on the trail and you'd be able to digest it. Now, of course, different people have different food problems, and eventually, a couple days later in that 200, maybe you can't keep down solid food. But as you're training, it is something to keep in mind that you have to you have to figure out how to continue to get calories in. And so that's something to be training, keep in
Yeah.
mind in your training. If you can train with eating something and going for a hike, I think that's valuable. And there's just also more gear requirements. You're required to carry a lot of stuff in a 200
A lot
because
of
you are
weight.
out.
Right.
Is a lot of weight. So, for the last few weeks, I've been training with 4 or 5 liters of water in my pack, just to have a super heavy pack. Um, because as I'm thinking about the second section of the Arizona Monsters, a 22-mile section that I will probably be on for several hours, and
Yeah.
I'll be in part of that during the heat of the day, so I'll need to carry enough water for several hours worth of being out. Uh,
Wow.
but it's just I think ultras in general are very community focused and there's a big sense of camaraderie. I think it's even more so in the 200 world. And so
Oh, wow.
I like when people get to meet other 200 miler runners on the trail and seeing them come into aid stations together or seeing people finish and they have a story of spending the last 3 days with this person that they only just met, 3 days ago. And so there can be questions I see on forums that people are like, "Hey, how can I find pacers?" You might not need a pacer because
Right.
your pacer might just be the runner who left the aid station with you. And there's a lot of them out there who want to run with you. So that's another thing to keep in mind as you're thinking about it is just be open to what the universe has to introduce you to another really special human.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's there's one other thing that I was going to mention this earlier, but then I didn't. The thing that I learned, I especially saw it in the first Cocodona, and it's happened every Fit 200 since then, is I have found that day 3 is a very special time. Like for whatever
Hmm.
reason, the runner's high for me turns on day 3. So
Interesting.
I am a I've discovered I'm a really good day 3 runner. The only way I could have ever discovered that was by running into day 3.
Sure.
And so there's lows, there's highs. For me, the first day sucks really bad. It's like I'm amazed I finished these things because I hate day 1 so much.
Wow.
Day 2 is a little bit better, and then day 3 is amazing. But I think my takeaway from it for to try to generalize it to anybody is that there will be lows, and that's okay, and
Yeah.
to expect it. And so when you have the low, don't be surprised, maybe even use it as a reminder that you should probably eat something. And then, but you will get better, and you will get out of that low, and you will feel good again, with the knowledge that you will then again feel low again. So it is
Right.
this up and down, but that's just
Roller
part
coaster.
of the joy of the whole thing, is just the different experiences, and just push through, push through, push through. I think one of the mantras people say is, don't quit before the sun comes up. It gets
Right.
dark and lonely at the nighttime. That's a terrible time to think about quitting. Wait till the sun comes up, because you're going to feel a lot better then.
Yeah.
But it's the whole thing about 200s is that so much time out there that it really is a life-changing experience. And I really do wish it for as many people who are willing to take it on, because it is really where I think the magic is.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, I know I said we were going to end on the last question, but I gotta follow up with one other one
Sure.
now. What do you think? You said it's a life-changing experience. What has changed in your life for the obviously for the positive here, the benefit, after all of these 200-mile races?
It's it's a little bit of a reflection of the thing I learned after Moab the first time, just that uh, to see evidence of how strong I am, and
Yeah.
um, and then for me, I have evidence of the influence that I've had in others, and that's really rewarding for me. I didn't set out to inspire anybody, but the fact that I have
Mhm.
done so makes me feel really good, and feels like when I finally leave this place, I will have left something good behind. So I think what's in general, it takes so much effort to train for it that you can't
Mhm.
possibly not have your life changed. You have to I have to make decisions almost every day for 6 to 9 months to a year about how your life is going to revolve around this eventual 200-mile thing, that it's going to totally change you. But I think the overall experience of then actually putting it all into practice and going through the actual adventure is just such a strong thing of just showing you, wow, yes, you are powerful, and look at here's the evidence and the celebration of that.
That's good. That's perfect. Yeah, I like that. Well, Wes, this has been a lot of fun hearing all about your
Good.
journey, but in particular, just the 200 distance and all you've done over a short period of time, 11, about to be 13, 200-mile plus distance races in, what do we say, 6 years, 7 years? It's
It's wild.
insane when you think about it. Have you ever calculated your total race distance like that you've done over your lifetime? Like it's
No.
got to be 5, 10,000, some pretty big.
Yeah, it's probably something pretty big. I haven't
Yeah,
looked into that. No,
that's
I'm
awesome.
pretty lucky that this adventure has brought me here and has given me the opportunity to have a conversation like this. I
Yeah,
never expected this when I started. I'm pretty lucky.
yeah, definitely. Well, thank you, Wes, for coming on. I really do appreciate you giving me your time. I know
Yeah.
it's an evening, it's late night, but I appreciate you coming on and talking. It's been awesome. And hopefully a lot of other listeners out there have heard, and I'm sure they know all about your journey on YouTube as well. But of course, I'll put in the show notes links to your website and also to your YouTube channel.
Thank you.
And definitely recommend everybody follow Cocodona, follow Wes on his journey, and watch the live stream and cheer him on. Send him some positive comments as well. But thank you, Wes. It's been awesome, and I wish you luck at both of these races coming up. But I'm sure you're going to do great.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Adventure Jogger, please consider joining our Patreon and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, and TikTok for more content like this. Without your continued support, we would not be able to produce this type of content. So thank you so much to everyone that has listened, followed along, subscribed, liked, commented, you name it, donated on Patreon. Thank you.